I don't just want to be in the race for clean energy. I want us to win the race.
Net zero. Oh my God, isn't it awful? Tell you what, we're not even a part of it. Look at the numbers.
Net zero, you know what net zero, they have no idea what it means, by the way. It's net zero. What does that mean? Nobody knows.
Climate change has become a climate crisis, and a threat has now become a reality.
Zero carbon.
East off. Hello and welcome to Zero Carbonista Series 6, The Cow in the Room. I'm Ian Collins, and this is your number one go-to environment-based podcast. If it's green, it is in. And Dale, we have a brand new title.
We do.
What in the name of windmills is going on?
As you know, we reached out to the audience for a title for the new series. Just Stop the Tories was the title of the last one. And of course, that happened at the election. And we thought we need to look forwards. What are we going to be talking about? We kicked a couple around. The one that nearly won it was Green on Green, because that would be alluding to, I mean, something that happened during the election campaign, which was a bit of green on green action, me and the Green Party. And I thought that might happen going forwards. And also it was a little bit kind of ambiguous in terms of like, maybe we'll get green policies followed by green policies. I don't know. It seemed okay until this one came along, The Cow in the Room, and it kind of just like, it landed like a cowpat, dominated everything around it.
Because when you said to me during the break, green on green, at first I thought, I'm not sure about that. Sounds a bit tame, for want of a better word. And then, I went away and I was racking my brains and thinking it's got multifarious, meanings to it. It's probably, a dozen different ways you could interpret it. And I was really sold on it. And I thought, right, the next time me and Dale speak, I'll go, yep, this is brilliant. And then you emailed me and went, yeah, we've got a new one. It's The Cow in the Room. I think this is actually really pretty darn clever, right?
Yeah, I think so too. I also think actually, though, it's brilliantly perfect for what we're about to do, because during this series, I'll be talking about The Cow in the Room kind of everywhere. And I've been doing it during the summer, and this is kind of how it came up. And I think this, right, in terms of, there are three big things that I always talk about: energy, transport, and food. In terms of energy and transport, I think it's nailed. The energy transition is well underway now with the Labour government. The electrification of transport is happening in front of our very eyes. And the thing that's missing really is action on food. And it is actually The Cow in the Room for that reason. There's another aspect of The Cow in the Room that maybe we'll talk about later. I mean, there are many aspects actually of The Cow in the Room, but it's all about food. And that's going to be the campaign of this season. So it's pretty fab.
And we should add, of course, as those listening to this right now on their podcast provider will have spotted, we've got a cow emblem, like a cow mascot here, a starring role from the cow.
We have a spiffy new album cover, I would say.
It's a great album cover, isn't it?
And it's like my band, my backing band. There's a small group of cows behind us. You've probably already seen this. If you're listening to this, you must have seen it. I think it's just marvelous.
Well, when people think of album covers, they think Nirvana or maybe Take That, possibly from your era, Brotherhood of Man, Dale. I don't know. But
behave.
This takes it to new heights, and it's a great cow. I'm sure somebody's going to name the cow as well over the course of this series.
There's several. There's like a little herd. It's my little flock. It's quite funny. But I just want to say this, actually, before we get lost in the doing of everything. The origination of The Cow in the Room was during this summer, or certainly me talking about it was during this summer, but it comes out of this event that's happening to me frequently. I find myself in conversations with, or on platforms with, environmentalists, people concerned about the climate, and people concerned about nature and wildlife and that kind of stuff. And they have one collective failing. It's like a cognitive dissonance. They don't seem to get that the fact that what they eat is the biggest driver of the climate crisis and the nature crisis. And for all of their efforts and concern, they haven't changed what they eat. I call it the cow in the room for that reason.
It is the cow in the room. And interestingly, we've been on this for a couple of years on this podcast, making that very point. I've lost count of how many really good environmentalists I speak to you've just said it well there, Del. They kind of treat this as a sort of a kind of an additional side note to the story, but it's so crucial to the story. It's front and center, right?
Yeah, and it's ultimately about not walking the talk. Because, like I said, I'm in platforms and conversations with these people, and we're agreed on the climate crisis and what we need to do about it, and the nature crisis and that kind of stuff. And it is energy, transport, and food. And then they seem to just not have taken that change into their own lives while asking for big things to happen. Like a co-founder of XR, we bumped into on stage at WOMAD. I not bump into her, but bumped into the issue. And she said, well, actually, we can all carry on eating meat. I'm like, what? What did you just say? I mean, this group that blocks the M25 to call for the government to do important things, there's a co-founder, at least, maybe many members as well, that haven't made the big change to their own life. It's a little change, really. Just stop eating f***ing animals.
You can't glue your genitals to the motorway and then nip down the chicken parlour afterwards. I'm sorry.
I like
they're
that.
completely
I like
they're
that.
completely inconducive. It's not possible. You can't have both. It's like when we interviewed, I can't remember who it was now, somebody you've locked horns with on my program, and we discovered that she drove like a massive Volvo diesel. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I do, but I can't remember who it was.
It's just like, okay, you can have inconsistencies. We could all do better,
Yeah.
but there's contradictions, and then there's contradictions.
There are, and like some people are stuck with the car they have. Money is an obstacle to some changes. I get that, but there are no obstacles to stopping eating animals. You don't need money to do it. You just need to make that choice, make that step, and say, do you know what? Animals, they're not just a big part of the problem. When it comes to the nature crisis, they are the problem. Industrial animal farming, is eating vast amounts of our planet and nature out of house and home.
Yeah. If you're on the glue, you can't be on the chicken. That's just to reiterate that point. Probably sounds rather wrong, but you take the point.
Yeah.
Listen, we haven't had an idle summer. It's been amazing. One of the things that happened, of course, for about the third or fourth year or something, we were at WOMAD, and your kind of starring role on the stage, and I was there to supply the questions and all the rest of it. What was interesting about that massive crowd, of course, because what we never talked about before we go on, there's a yoga session happening, right?
Yes, there is.
There's always a yoga session before we take to the stage to record the live version of Zero Carbonista. And I always think, what are all the yoga people going to do? Are they going to hang around, or are they just there for the yoga? Is yoga a kind of natural warm-up act to Dale Vince?
I have no idea. I don't know what to say.
It might be. My point, what I was trying to get to in a rather long-winded way, is the crowds were absolutely huge and the questions were just brilliant. And I'm talking about thought-out questions, right? People who are engaged, who, want answers, or they want discussion, they want to embellish a point that's, previously been relegated on the news agenda, etc. Really interested people with interesting questions.
Yeah, brilliant crowd. I would say the crowd at WOMAD are the best, very best of being most informed and engaged and stuff. And I've taken this cow on the road kind of mini pitch this year to Glastonbury, to WOMAD, to the Massive Attack gig on the Downs at the end of August, and just shared it with the crowd. And whenever I'm on a panel, and I actually in most of those places I may have done that, I just say to people, look, we all care about the climate, we all care about animals. Hands up if you're plant-based. And
there you go.
And that's the telling moment. And I'm like, come on, guys.
Well, let me throw a question in here, which is connected to festivals. This was from Patrick, who emailed and says, is your Grid Faeries solution going to be available to smaller festivals? I think we should explain firstly who or what are the Grid Faeries. Yeah,
so the Grid Faeries is a new venture, and its aim is to squeeze the last drops of diesel out of our lives. So, it's out of the grid, it's coming out of transport, but it's still in festivals. I think 12 million litres a year are burned at outdoor events in our country, which is a hideous amount of diesel. And most of these events are based in the same place every year, sometimes for 20 years. And nobody seems to have the foresight to say, well, look, we're going to be here next year and for as many years as we know. Why don't we bring the grid in? Instead, every year they bring in generators, they have smell, they have noise, and they have, of course, pollution and the cost of burning diesel. And so Grid Faeries has got a three-pronged attack. One is short-term intervention, drop a battery into the event and say, look, you can do this on renewable energy with a battery. Meanwhile, negotiate with the grid company to see about bringing the grid in. Third limb, if the grid is too expensive, build a renewable project next door, like a solar project or something, so that we can throw a cable over the fence in the future and power the event that way. So it's just about getting diesel out of live events, festivals, music, that kind of stuff in our country.
Because what normally happens, and we'd normally put this maybe in the right right-wing nut feature, although there is maybe some understanding of this. People who go, look, they've got all this, green stuff going on, and they've got freaking generators that are run on diesel. What's that all about? We've heard that 1,000 times.
There is a contradiction there. And the Massive Attack gig was fantastic in that respect because it was completely diesel generator free. And I stood on the stage talking to the crowd, and I cupped my ear and I said to them, listen carefully, guys. Paused just like that, said you won't hear a diesel generator, you won't smell one, and you won't see one because there aren't any, the whole gig. And it's a fantastic difference at an outdoor event when you aren't walking past generators buzzing away and polluting the air.
And at that point, the woman from the Green Party arrived in her Volvo. Do you remember that? Just made that up, maybe. A lot of people asking, naturally, this question comes on behalf of about 300 people who asked the question. Tracy in particular, 2 months in, how are the Labour government doing?
Oh, I think they're doing rather well. We saw immediate movement on renewable energy, the unbanning of onshore wind. There's a consultation out at the moment, which closes, I think, in about a week. And I think that they'll do more. I think they'll make a presumption in favour planning-wise for renewable energy next after unbanning it. And I think there'll be some work on pylons and grid as well. I think there have been some steps I wouldn't support, like the expansion of, was it London Airport or something like that? I don't know if it's a runway or just like more flights. I'm not sure what it was. But I
don't think it's a runway.
No, good.
Yeah. I think there's just, well, I mean, the way I read it, there might be a temporary increase, but that won't be ongoing.
Okay, so it wasn't such a big deal after all, because, you can imagine clobbered with that on a right-wing radio show. I think it was our friend Mikey Graham, actually. He's like, oh, what about this? And I'm like, oh, Mikey, you can't have everything you want in the world, can you? And do you know what? He just agreed with me. He said, yeah, you're right.
Concorde is not coming back. Can we just say that? And there's not going to be another runway there. So we will watch with interest on that. Interestingly, the environment stuff, which, as you rightly say, straight out of the traps, lots of announcements. And it's only the beginning, isn't it? The whole Great British Energy Project, as it were, will, of course, be incremental. There'll be more announcements as time goes on.
Yeah, the Great British Energy, the company, or the concept of it, I think was written into law last week by an act of parliament. And, there's a whole bunch of stuff happening and going to happen. I think they're doing well, but I think it's just great to have grown-ups in charge. It's such a massive difference to have common sense being talked, having things getting done instead of, an internal bun fight about who's going to be the next leader and that kind of stuff, which we became used to under the Tories and all this culture war stuff, about immigration. I mean, that reminds me, we haven't got a right-wing nut section, I think, in this episode right now, but I was on right-wing radio with somebody. They said to me in the House of Commons today, a Reform MP, because we've got some now, obviously, unfortunately as well, and tried to mock Ed Miliband for what they called his obsession with green energy. And they said to me, what do you think of that? And I just laughed out loud. I'm like, oh my God, these are the people that obsess about small boat crossings across the channel, which is 3% of our immigration issue. 3%. They obsess about that. And they're picking on Ed Miliband for obsessing about something that is so nationally important.
Isn't that's kind of like saying to, going to a hospital, say, the trouble with you doctors, you're obsessed with saving people's lives.
That's right.
Never stop you with your freaking stethoscope and your instruments, always trying to make people better. Who do you think you are?
And they're like, well, never mind that. Look at the length of their toenails. That's what they're obsessed about. But, because green energy is about getting our energy bills down and keeping them there, being energy independent of the global market in fossil fuels and stuff like that. And of course, getting to net zero is such a big deal for our country. It's about jobs and economic growth as well. And to complain that somebody's obsessed about something that has such a big impact on our future, well, it just shows you kind of people they are.
Well, you've actually been in Parliament yourself, haven't you? Been down at the Houses of Parliament. You went to some political awards, is that right?
I spoke there. Check me out. I've been speaking everywhere this summer, including the House of Commons, although obviously not in the chamber or whatever they call it.
I would have liked to have seen that in the Speaker's chair.
Yeah, that'd be a gig I could take. But anyway... this was the Political Purpose Awards, and the idea of it was to celebrate, I think it was the second year, to celebrate the doings of politicians that are, kind of doing good eco things. Sadiq Khan picked up an award, well-deserved, for his work on air pollution in London, for example, and stuff like that. And I came on at the end, after all of the celebrations of all of the good guys, with the Wooden Spoon Award for the biggest duffer on the environment in the political sphere. And guess who won?
Go on.
Well, it's my old friend Rishi Sunak.
Rishi Sunak won, did he? He got the wooden spoon.
He did. And I had such a laugh describing why, all of his actual policy reversals on green energy and the drilling for oil and gas and coal and that kind of stuff. And then the fact that he even stepped up to defend us from these mythical eco threats like having to share a car or 7 bins for recycling. That got a good old giggle from the crowd. And we just had a real laugh about it. It kind of topped the event off, actually. And they made a spoon. It was, it was a 4-foot tall wooden spoon, and they etched his face on the front of it. It was quite marvelous.
A 4-foot wooden spoon. I like that.
Yeah.
Some kind of Tim Burton prop. That's great.
Tim Burton. Did you say?
I see. Yeah. See where you went. I see what you were doing there.
Come on.
How is that stand-up career going down?
Well, I was thinking I might have a go at that, actually.
I think you do all right, actually.
I do, why not?
Yeah, well, apparently when you get a taste of it, you can't put it down.
Put it down.
It's like apparently people who play golf say the same thing. When you start playing golf, you can't stop.
I cannot imagine that. I cannot.
If you ever see me with a golf club, Dale, please shoot me in the teeth.
The teeth.
Please. Just please, just do it.
Fair enough.
It's what he would have wanted, I think, is the phrase that comes to mind. Here's a question. This comes from Jay, who says, surely the Forwards Festival that allowed the Massive Attack Act Festival could have used your battery gear. Why didn't they?
Oh, the Forward Festival that followed the Massive Attack gig?
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Look, they could have, and we offered it, right? I mean, I don't know. But these things are organized by commercially minded people, and I think they were just like, can't be bothered. We'll just get the generators in.
That's what happened. But then, of course, this is like the beginning of new tech, if you like. So,
in a way, yeah.
Yeah, ish. Maybe next year.
Yeah, maybe so. But look, we've landed some big gigs this year, and our plan is just to have some impact, to show that it can be done on a big scale with some big acts and stuff like that, and just to prod the sector and say, come on, guys.
UK wind power licenses go like wildfire, Dale. These were the last week were they auctions or sales, whatever you want to call them?
So yeah, it is an actual auction for what's known as a contract for difference. This is a contract you have with the government in effect that sets the price that you'll get for your new renewable energy project, whatever the market does. If the market goes below it, you get topped up. If the market goes above it, you pay the government. So it's an interesting mechanism that kind of works. And when it does work, it's definitely worked this time because our government landed 10 gigawatts of capacity. It might be an all-time record. It's certainly a lot more than the Tories landed last time they did it, which was 0. They got 0. Big story there. The wind energy came in like super cheap, around about 5-6p a kilowatt hour or something like that. But for me, the story was the one behind this. It's the nuclear story, right? Because offshore wind can be built in a handful of years. Certainly onshore could be built much less than that. Nuclear is taking around about 15 years to be built. And when it does come, the price is twice as much as renewable energy, as we can see through this CFD that just really went big. I mean, there's 11 million homes worth of power at this like 5 or 6p price. Right now, Hinkley's being built in our country. It'll be getting 10p when it finally gets going. It's about 10 years late already. Who knows when it's actually going to go on the grid? The big question is about Sizewell C over on the East Coast. It should not go ahead because it can't be with us for maybe 15 to 20 years. While they build it, there's a proposal that we pay for the energy as if they're making it, even though they're not, which is like additionally crazy. There are all kinds of reasons why we just don't need more new nuclear power. And that, for me, is a story behind this really successful auction for new renewable energy.
Final story before a final question, Dale. Denmark have, not just a cow in the room, they have a cow tax in the room.
I love it.
It's a great story, this. What's happening?
Yeah, so, I mean, this is a brilliant move from Denmark. People have proposed meat taxes before. I mean, but this is it's like a live meat tax, if you like. You have to pay to have a cow. £80 per cow is the current going rate in Denmark. And they're going to use the money, they put it into a fund to help farmers move away from animal agriculture, as far as I can see, to help them green up, which is it's a decent idea. It's going to add 23p to a kilo of minced beef cost. I don't know how that compares because I haven't bought a kilo of minced beef ever in my life. It doesn't sound like a lot of money. And I say, what the because this is the sector above all sectors that's driving the climate crisis. So hallelujah, well done, Denmark.
There it is. And a final question. This comes in from James, who says, Dale, by 2050, there could be more than 40 million metric tons of wind turbine blade waste piling up worldwide. Why do you push this agenda, Vince?
I knew we had a serious one coming.
There you go.
Very interesting question, James. And it reminds me of the issue of cobalt. All right. Nobody seemed to care about cobalt until electric cars came along and used cobalt in their batteries. And then it was the thing that people brought up about electric cars. Oh, yes, but they use cobalt, which comes mainly from Africa. And there are question marks over how it gets mined and stuff like that. And then when you check the facts, cobalt has been in use by the oil and gas industry forever. It's used in refining. And the biggest user of cobalt in the world today is still the oil and gas industry. But hey, electric cars use it. So let's talk about cobalt, right? That's the first point. Actually, it's the point I'm trying to make here. Because when you look at fiberglass, it's the same thing. Right now, or at least a few years ago, the world produced 10 million tons of fiberglass in a year. That's growing at 5% compound every year. So by 2050, James, there will be nearly 400 million metric tons of fiberglass waste in the world, of which 10% will be from wind turbine blades. Fiberglass is used to make boats, it's used to make consumer products, it's used in cars, it's used everywhere, 10 million tons a year. And we don't have recycling for it, but it's only in windmills that people are starting to say, but we should have recycling for windmill blades. That's a terrible thing. And it's basically undoes all the good that wind turbines can do, which is, of course, silly. But at the same time, the wind industry itself is leading the world in terms of creating recyclable fiberglass. That's happening. That's coming. And it's coming because of wind energy.
There it is. That's one answer for you, James. The other answer is f*** off.
Sorry, did I rant? I think I ranted a little bit, but it's like it got me going, really.
I thought it was great. It was a superb answer. And on that point, Dale, we have finished episode 1 of season 6. Hurrah!
I want to say thanks for that, but actually, I really enjoyed it. I always really enjoy it, and it's the first one, right?
It's the first.
The Cow in the Room, part 1.
We'll speak next week, Dale.
Thank you. I mean something funny, but I can't. I've run out.
Thank you's nice, isn't it? I don't know why you're thanking me, but thank you to everybody.
Yeah, thank you for listening, guys.
Everybody, indeed. Don't forget, of course, to follow Dale on social media, twitter.com/DaleVince or x.com/DaleVince. On, I think you're on Instagram too, facebook.com/DaleVince, and, of course, on TikTok too.
Or, as it should be now, maybe, TikTok Moo.
Zero carbon
East of.